So thank y'all for joining the session. We are fortunate enough to have a brilliant art director who is at GSD&M right now. She has her undergrad, her BA in arts with an emphasis in animation from Southwest University of Visual Arts. And then she also went to the Creative Circus as well, and has been at GSD&M for a few years now and has kind of moved up the ranks there and has done some amazing work. And she is going to kind of talk about how to live authentically, if I could speak, and kind of talk about kind of creating a narrative that best embodies who you are. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Donnie.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Donine, and if you can't tell, we're going to be talking about space today, specifically yours, mine, and advertising. I'm Donine. I'm an art director at GSD&M, and I'm actually the daughter of a teenage parent. So my mom had me when she was 16 years old, which is pretty atypical. I'm a 90s baby. I'm one of the last pre-internet generations that is alive so far. I've had family in the military, and they fought in the Iraq War. My best friend of 15 years is gay. Excuse me. I did JROTC for 3 years. I'm a salsa dancer, and I'm the youngest generation of 5 Hispanic women. And some of those things are who I am, and some of those things are what I do, but I definitely don't fit a lot of the Mad Men-esque stereotypes that you typically associate with advertising. And we're going to talk about how I use all of these experiences in my everyday job and how you can kind of determine yours and use yours too. So this is where I work. I work at GSD&M here in Austin on the United States Air Force account, which is a pretty great gig, if I do say so myself. It's got all the benefits of agency life. So that's all the creative leadership, project managers, budgets, everything that comes with the freedom of living and working in an agency. But it has the structure of a military client. So that protects me from a lot of the pitfalls of advertising. And it's definitely easy to believe in the brand. So what seems like a conservative client is actually one of the most progressive military branches. They're very supportive of LGBT. They want diversity representation in their leadership. And fun fact, for the first time ever, both of the top enlisted and officer ranks are held by Black men, which happened in June of this year. So they're definitely on the forefront of things, and they're really fun to work for. But before we get started, just for clarification, just so you guys understand, anyone serving in the U.S. Air Force, regardless of their gender, is an airman. So airmen are more than 2 service people. I don't make the rules. So, Marines have Marines, Army has soldiers, and Air Force has airmen. So when I say airmen, it doesn't necessarily always mean men. So we're going to talk about where you fit in advertising. We're going to talk about the cycle of advertising influence, who writes history. We're going to get into some examples, and then we're going to have a Q&A. So let's talk about space. We are going to start with context. So whenever you enter advertising, everything in advertising has context. Where you are in your life, where the world is, the brand history, the people viewing it, all of these are circumstances that kind of form where you are in relation to the work that you're making. And it's really important to understand that and keep that in mind before you start making and creating the work. But before that, let's talk about imposter syndrome. If you're wondering why I am here, I am too. Imposter syndrome is the belief that there's some police going to come and take you away if you've done a bad job, and you don't exactly quite know what you're doing. But guess what? Everyone feels that way, even people who've been doing this for decades. The whole point of this whole presentation is to just don't let your doubt hold you back from expressing your viewpoints and to push past that doubt and own who you are anyway. because whether you know it or not, every single one of you has something about you that makes you belong in advertising, and that's why you're here. Your perspective can change things, and we're gonna talk about how you do that. So just as you watch this, keep in mind, it doesn't matter what your lens is. It doesn't matter where you are on the opinion spectrum. You have a point of view and it matters and it belongs here. And I'm going to show you how all of those experiences from my life actually come through in my work, and why I'm even telling you about them, because you'll see by the end of this presentation, it actually does matter quite a bit. So your lens is a culmination of the time you were born, the technology you had available to you, your specific circumstances that gave you life, your experiences with other people who you care about, your choices, and why you act on what you do is a combination of all of those things. So you can't shoehorn yourself into the lenses of others. That's how you get work like the Pepsi commercial, which is super inauthentic. And that is caused by someone trying to embrace a lens that isn't theirs. So you need to embrace yours to make authentic work. Your lens is your ability to see certain things that only you can. And it takes many, 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 many lenses to make good work in advertising. So the cycle of influence is something really to keep in mind when you're creating work. When we begin to operate in this advertising industry, we create culture, and we create one culture. So what is represented in advertising either defines or reinforces what becomes reality. So we can start off with the message, and then we're going to go straight up, and we're going to produce the work to get that message out to people. And the ideals are reinforced and maintained throughout that work. And then it goes through this cycle where the audience reflects or rejects them. And then you repair what doesn't work, and then the cycle starts again. But essentially what this means is what you care about and who you are will and should influence your work. But who writes history anyway? So let's watch the one and only campaign that is not a campaign that I worked on. This is actually a campaign from BBDO. And it illustrates a few concepts that we'll talk about after.
If you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, who would you choose?
Kylie Minogue.
Oh. Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, God, I wouldn't have a clue.
I know, straight up. Paul Hogan.
Kim Kardashian.
No.
I'd like to have dinner with Justin Bieber.
What? He's not coming to my house.
I'd have Bob Hawke.
Dave Hughes.
Barry Humphries.
Jimi Hendrix.
People who have made a difference in the world, maybe Nelson Mandela at the dinner table.
I don't know what he's going to say. I'm scared.
If you could have dinner with anyone in the world, who would you choose?
Probably our whole family, like a whole extended family.
Mum and Dad. Mum and Dad. Does it have to be a celebrity? Could it be family?
We love it. We talk about how school is. We ask Mum and Dad how their day was.
Family.
Yeah, Mum and Dad.
Family. Who would you like to have dinner with?
They just want to be with us while they're eating food, which is pretty cool.
They see us above everything. I'm going to get...
Yeah. Bit of a message in it for me.
Yeah.
What are we having for dinner?
So this campaign is illustrating a few key concepts, besides being amazing for a food brand. But some of the people that the adults were collectively saying that we have decided as a society who matters most are people like Jimi Hendrix, Nelson Mandela, Justin Bieber. their names get remembered, and this is how history is made. So it's in large part due to advertising, and because what we create and who we put out in the world, that is who people remember. So we're living in a time where a lot of marketing people and people in advertising are pulling back on choosing celebrities. They're choosing to highlight people that they want to be remembered. So like this, they want to remember time for family, like their moms, their dads, their grandmas, and that's something that you can totally do. That's fair game.
If you could have dinner with...
There we go. So now we're going to put it into practice and kind of see how these concepts come through in the whole creative process. So this is actually an example from earlier this year. The context here was, it was in 2020, the country was in quarantine from COVID, and we just saw the George Floyd murder happen. The Air Force is a nonpartisan entity, meaning they can't take sides either way, and they want to shed light on the fact that they only have 6% of their rated careers, which is like pilots or people in leadership, that are non-white people, and that's pointing to a giant systemic problem. And they basically wanted to take that head on. So they wanted to educate current airmen to understand that unconscious bias exists and we need to solve it together. And that works for advertising two ways. So it activates the current airmen into understanding that this is their problem too. But it also says to the world that these are the people who belong here and this is who we want. So the cycle of influence here is that we just want airmen to understand that unconscious bias exists and that we're going to solve it together. So we're going to produce the work, and then hopefully that ideal is going to be reinforced and maintained. And then the airmen in the audience are either going to agree or disagree, and then we're going to see what works and what didn't. So it's kind of like the scientific process in a way. So this is what we did.
We are all airmen.
We are all airmen, but we are all different.
We don't all look alike.
We don't all think alike.
And we don't all hold the same beliefs. Far from it.
Our individual experiences can serve as great teachers, but they can blind us from seeing the experiences of others. They make us biased.
You may be thinking, I know what bias is, and I don't have it. But that's exactly what unconscious bias is. It can't be seen or felt.
It hides itself in our routine behaviors and doesn't surface until someone else shines the light on it.
Until we look at where we are and wonder why we haven't made more progress. To be biased is to be human. You're biased, but so am I.
So am I.
We all are.
If we can't acknowledge our biases, or worse yet, if we don't even try to,
we are inviting them to divide us. Our biases may be unintentional,
but their impact causes real pain. So how do we see what someone else sees?
How do we know what they know?
How do we feel what they feel? It starts with conversation, because we haven't and won't ever be them.
You may have never been the only one in the room who looked like you, heard the hurtful comments about your culture,
or been underestimated or disregarded simply based on someone else's unverified thoughts about you.
It's also quite likely you've been the person who's had those unverified thoughts about someone else. To those of you who have not been the only in the room,
please listen. To those of you who are the only in the room,
please talk with us. These conversations will be uncomfortable.
And sometimes they will just be plain hard. But when we listen to each other and talk with each other,
we can enhance our relationships and build truer equity. This is the time. This is the place. This is our chance. The only way to counteract unconscious bias is with conscious effort. It must begin with ourselves.
We have to give ourselves a long, hard look. We must be humble and open.
And welcome feedback when our biases reveal themselves. We all desire to be the best version of ourselves as we serve our country.
We all dream of living, working, and loving in a place where we can thrive and be our whole selves.
Together, we see more and we know more.
Together, we can identify our blind spots and support each other. If we don't, nothing will change.
Nothing will change. So let's take pause.
Let's listen.
Let's talk. And let's change for the better. Aim high, Airmen.
Awesome. So, the aftermath. So, a note on this, advertising is so subjective. So you need to be clear on who you're talking to and your objective. And especially when you're talking about hard things, if you end up going into advertising like this, or advertising at all, really, you can't let negative comments derail your whole idea. And you don't always have to take everyone's opinion and change everything, because then it isn't really yours or a reflection of you. So we had people on both sides of the spectrum. People, if you ever want to be really depressed, just scroll through YouTube comments. So this shows some people who thought it was really terrible and that we didn't need to be pushing such a liberal agenda, which we weren't trying to do. And then there were current servicemen who really loved the videos and that really understood that the negative comments were an exact illustration of why we needed to make this type of content. So the next part of that was that we had to move and make a sister video, and we needed to motivate airmen to start to exercise inclusion because it's better for the team without destroying unity. Because we can have this really great message, but if we're alienating half of our team who don't feel like it is for them, we're not really accomplishing that for the military. So again, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to motivate airmen to exercise inclusion because it's better for everybody. And so this is what we did.
We all represent the U.S. Air Force, but we're more than airmen, more than civilians, more than ranks. We each represent something beyond this country and beyond our service. We represent our parents, our children, our partners, our values, ourselves. The day you decide to serve isn't the day you give up who you are. It's the day you show who you are, and the day we become stronger for having you in our ranks. No matter your culture, your beliefs, your background, or who you identify as, one thing will always be true. You belong here. The Air Force is our common ground. It's an invitation to learn more about each other so that we can accept our differences with understanding and empathy. It should motivate us to make everyone feel like they belong. If we can put our lives in each other's hands on the front lines, we need to have each other's backs when we're home. No one's identity should ever be dismissed or disregarded. If we undermine each other, we undermine the very thing we serve. We all serve the same nation and fight for the same mission. We all joined for the same reasons: to serve our country, to provide for our families, to be a part of something bigger than ourselves so that we might become our best selves. But if we can't see the best in each other, we'll never be the best versions of ourselves. Our diversity is our strength. Our combined differences make us faster, better, and more powerful. Because we're different, we see what our enemies can't and have experienced what they won't. We have the advantage as long as we continue to work together. The Air Force is an environment where everyone should be able to reach their full potential. We've come a long way and we're making strides, but we're not there yet. So let's continue to build it more consciously. Let's open our minds and opportunities to more people. Let's be more willing to see each other, to hear each other, and to be curious about each other's perspectives. Inclusion is not the enemy of readiness. division is. If we want to win as a team, we have to champion each other first. Welcome to the family. This Air Force is your Air Force. Aim high, Airmen.
So the aftermath was a lot better. And people thought that this definitely encapsulated more of the same mission and the military that we all strive to create. And then there were some people who also thought that it was, pushing Marxist tropes. We didn't intend on that, but and again, advertising is subjective. But at the end of the day, it's still a win because we got all of this representation in there. And we now have a produced piece of Air Force work to point to say, we make content like this. We get to make work that is pro-LGBTQ in a military setting, which is huge. And why is this important? Because advertising creates and reinforces reality. So the spot, again, does two things. It says, this is who is in our military, this is who we accept, and we stand for tolerance. And then the second thing it does is that it says, if you don't think like this, you aren't with us. Because at the end of the day, these people will be in wartime together. I think we kind of forget that when we're making advertising for them. But problems and strengths are amplified in the military because the stakes are so very high. They put each other's lives in each other's hands every single day. So there isn't room for discrimination, hesitation, or doubt because it isn't about any one person, it's about the team. So it might be a 30-second ad that airs on national TV, or it might be a video on YouTube, but it is actually more than that, and it is us taking our responsibility of representation very seriously in a serious way. And also, this was the first time that a trans person has ever been knowingly depicted and intentionally put in a military spot. So that's pretty cool. But you might be thinking that's not how I would have done it, and that's perfectly okay because that's your lens and you need to figure out what that is because you need your voice of difference in the room while the work is being created. So another example brief is still from this year. We're still in quarantine. We still can't shoot anything because of COVID, but we need to get minorities in pilot roles because again, those are where the best opportunities are. And only 6% of the Air Force top pilots are people of color. And it's really difficult to get to those positions if you're an underprivileged youth. So the Air Force actually has something for that. And we just needed to raise awareness and applications for it. And the only assets we had were pictures of the year before that high schoolers took on their phones who actually participated. So we had to be a little crafty, and this is what we did.
I'm Lieutenant Kelsey Owens, and I'm training to become a pilot in the United States Air Force. But before I joined the Air Force, the Aim High Flight Academy gave me the skills and confidence I needed to fly. It's a 3-week program where you get the hands-on experience of flying an aircraft, and you also get one-on-one experience with Air Force instructors. There were students from all over the country. It was pretty awesome seeing all of us come together and share like this one common interest. They pay for your room and board, your meals, and they pay for all your flight hours. If I were to go to the private side, 13 flight hours, it would cost me about $4,000. My most memorable moment from the program was being able to solo. I came in not having a single flight hour, but I just remember looking over to where the co-pilot was normally sitting, and she wasn't there, and I was like, oh wow. If you're a high school or college student and you're interested in flying, this program is for you.
So as you can see, that's completely different than the more serious stuff, but it's still along the lines of what I love to do. And fun fact, Lieutenant Owens was actually from Albuquerque, which is also my hometown. So it all comes back around, and when you start to create content for people that you intend to serve.
I'm Lieutenant.
Okay, we have one more example brief. So context is still 2020. We need to get minorities into ROTC because ROTC is a way to stay in college, and you don't have to give up your life, and it may add to it, in fact. So we wanted to tell real, relatable, motivational stories of current cadets with dignity and respect, because so often a diversity story is just a brand story coming out of a diverse mouth, and it's leaving out so much backstory of how that person's journey influences their decision making. So 2 30-second spots, super quick. Here's the first one.
Being the first to serve in my family definitely makes me feel proud. My little brother looks up to me a lot, and he's my inspiration for being here. Joining this program has changed my life, and he sees that he can do that for himself. ROTC is a family-like culture. Every obstacle, you have to have a team. You can't do anything alone. No matter what struggle I come across, having people there for me is something that I feel is beneficial. I'm on a path to becoming an air battle manager in the Air Force, and the ROTC is the way I'm going to get there.
That's the first one. And then this is the second.
When I was 16 years old, my mom lost everything and we became homeless. I lost hope in myself. I lost hope in my future. And when I learned about ROTC and everything that the program had to offer, it gave me a sense of purpose. I care about justice because everyone was created equally and deserves a fair chance at life. I would love to go to law school and become a lawyer in the Air Force.
That was really fun to work on, and it's a really great story of how sometimes your life points you in a direction, and the Air Force can help you get there. So how this applies by department, because I know that there's going to be a whole bunch of people in advertising and specifically in this class that aren't creative. So in essence, if your name is going to be on the project, you are responsible. So media, you actually get to choose which client you amplify by which agencies that you apply to. You get to choose who you use your amplification, techniques and talents to actually get the message out there. Strategy, you get to choose which direction to take the brand versus, a couple of different ways that you can do this work. Project management, you get to protect the messages that you find important, because when it comes down to it, you're the ones advocating for more time to dive deeper to create this content. Account leadership, you get to advocate for the messages to and from client, which is amazing because, not one is always right all the time. And creative creates the messaging. So everybody contributes, and it's a huge responsibility when we're telling stories because we have to get it right. So your checklist is basically everything you do is a reflection of who you are. I have a photographer friend who says everything you touch or create is essentially a selfie. So back to the beginning, I'm the daughter of a teenage parent, and I care about advocating for communities for teenagers because I know how much of a difference it can make. I'm a 90s baby and one of the last pre-internet generation, so I actually want to make work that connects us more and causes us to relate to each other more in a human way, rather than experiencing each other on a screen. I've had family in the military and they fought in the Iraq War. That's a pretty obvious one. I care about our military and taking care of our veterans, and so it's not really a surprise that I ended up on a military client. My best friend of 15 years is gay, so I care deeply about LGBTQ people, and I've gone through those journeys with him. And I did JROTC for 3 years, so I know how much that community taught me. And my salsa dancing actually teaches me how to celebrate cultural joy and not just paint it as a come-up story every time. Diversity stories aren't come-up stories. They're not synonymous with each other, and learning how to tell the difference between those two is really important in what I do. And then I'm the youngest of 5 generations of Hispanic women, so I care about upholding them because they would be who I want to have dinner with. So your lens, if you're paying attention, take a screenshot because your lens is a culmination of all of those things. Again, where are you from? Who do you care about? Where were you born? what specific set of circumstances are influencing your decision making, what formative experiences with other people, what causes do you care about. And a lot of your lens can change. Like, it doesn't have to be a static thing that you put your stake in the ground and you say, this is who I am and what I do, and you're locked into that for the rest of your life. And that's a really beautiful thing. Your checklist is always good to refer back to say, are you upholding and using your lens? Are you telling the story in a way that feels authentic to you? And are you acting in accordance with your goals? If something feels wrong, you're going to know about it, and you're probably going to have a gut feeling. And you need to listen to that gut feeling and figure out what's going on. So how you do that as a junior or an intern is you ask this question: have you thought about? We need you to know what your lens is very clearly, and we need you to own it. And then when that moment comes up in the creative brief, we need you to ask us, hey, have you thought about, for instance, hey, have you thought about representing the 15,000 currently serving trans people in our military? Can we put that in the spot? Or have we thought about telling more diverse stories? Just because I've been noticing that a lot of these stories that we currently have aren't really telling the whole picture. Or, ask, have you thought about whatever your great idea is? So here's some unsolicited wisdom, especially for spec or student work. I want to see your lens in action. So I did a portfolio review of one of the campaigns, I think from Clay's class back in the spring. And the campaign was for a Canon camera. So the campaign was everyone is an artist, and the students chose beautiful photography. But if everyone is an artist by the campaign messaging, they could have picked up their own cameras and shot what matters to them. So you need to take that step further, because right now you don't have any limitations. You don't have any clients telling you what to do. So you might as well make the thing that you love and show it, and then get hired because of it. Because if you do it that way, you're going to end up on a client that you actually care about and that you love to. So your character matters, and how you treat each other matters. And advertising is not life, so live yours and invest in yourself. I know you're all in college on a Zoom call, and that's not ideal, but this is the time that you get, and you're not going to get this time back. So like it or not, you have to choose what you're going to do with this time. And so my question to all of you is, what are you going to do with it? And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right, first of all, that was amazing. Loved all of that insight. So what I'm going to do for kind of Q&A is there've been a couple of questions. Jenny, was that a wave of you have a question? Okay, I'm gonna unmute Jenny first.
Before you get into everything else, because I know your story, Donine, would you mind just real quickly talking about how you went from high school to art school to working to creative circus to where you are now, just so that our students understand kind of the pathway wasn't necessarily traditional for you?
Yeah, definitely. So I actually was in high school and doing the JROTC thing, and I actually went to 3 different high schools in 3 different states. And I was always kind of the weird kid in, going to all the art clubs and art schools. And then I chose to go to art school at the time to create cartoons, which was a super weird thing for me to choose as a major, but it ended up being actually the thing that I use the most, because all advertising is creating a narrative and utilizing story to tell or sell. So I went to art school, and then I ended up being a designer for a ladder company, which made no sense. So if I had any advice, you don't have to take, I know it feels like it, I know we're all in a recession, like if you can get a job, it doesn't, and if you're going to be miserable, do not take that job. Hold out, because you're going to end up doing that job and leaving anyway, which is exactly what happened to me. And I worked in the industry for about 2 years creating content for a ladder company. And then I went to Creative Circus, which is a portfolio school in Atlanta. And I got hired directly out of that program and actually didn't finish. So this industry is pretty great because it doesn't matter necessarily all the time what your pedigree is or where you come from. If you can do the job and if you do it well, and it doesn't matter how much resources you have, you're going to get more resources and you're going to get help. You just need to have the drive to actually get yourself to that space. And that's it. The rest is history. Now I work on the Air Force account.
Nice. That's, again, non-traditional, but an amazing pathway. Okay, so a couple of questions that have been coming up in the chat. So kind of asking how clients and agencies are pivoting during COVID. So you talked about not being able to shoot or film new content because of COVID. What are some other ways that you've noticed agencies and also some of your clients kind of pivoting or shifting because of COVID?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the beginning, they kind of halted everything and we couldn't go on shoots and we couldn't create anything new. So the first shift was that we were all working remotely, and then now we're having to kind of piecemeal together all of these existing assets to do that narrative. But currently, they're starting to open up shoots right now, and what they have done is there are things called COVID compliant officers that we just hire for shoots now, where on production there's one guy who his entire job is just to sanitize and just like, slap us if we're getting too close to each other or something. So we have been able to actually go on shoots again, which is a good sign as we start to like move into moving forward, because that means that we're still creating work and we still need help and the jobs are opening back up. So I don't think that this year you're going to see, typically advertising has a hiring cycle and it gets a little bit slower in the holiday times. I don't necessarily think that that's going to be totally true this year because all of our production was halted at the beginning of the year. So if you have contacts, send them emails and just say, hey, happy holidays. Send them your book, hit them up. So yeah.
Okay, nice. Sorry, I'm now scrolling because there have been several others that have come through. In terms of kind of deciding, because again, I'm a media person. So in terms of these kind of creative executions and decisions of where these things are placed, how does that kind of teamwork and camaraderie work between the creative side and the media, and then also the kind of strategic, right? So your strategy people.
Totally. So typically there is a media plan created first, and they'll say, okay, we know that we're going to be needing a YouTube video, a Facebook video, and an Instagram video. Here are the specs. And then strategy takes it from there and kind of and then account says, okay, this is the content we need. Strategy puts us in a little bucket basically that says, here's the kind of messaging that we want to stay in, and gives us a few key points just to make sure that we hit. And then creative comes up with a few different ways that you can actually solve that brief or that problem. If you think about it as everyone but creative is setting up the problem, and then creative is the solution. So if creative comes back and says, hey, like, we see this problem, we hear you, but we actually think that an Instagram placement might be better than than a YouTube placement. That's totally okay. The media team can be like, okay, let's shift some things around. So the camaraderie is really great because everyone, there's a lot of trust. Find a team that you trust and that you know that everyone is doing the job to the best of their ability. And there's that way when you have things that need to change, because everything will change, and that's totally normal, and we need to all work through that. That's essentially what the camaraderie gets you through.
Perfect. So again, kind of a stronger campaign by, even if you do have slightly different perspectives, right? So bringing your own lens into it from whatever perspective that is, whether it's the kind of your research and strategy element versus your creative insights versus kind of the media kind of research that you've done as well. I love that.
Absolutely.
Some common questions that we're getting is in terms of kind of how to best utilize internships, finding your first job, kind of general getting your foot in the door. So kind of overall advice that you might have of maybe 2 or 3 key things that you would recommend to have people kind of stand out or get the most out of their internship opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. So finding an internship is really about making relationships with the people that you want to work for. So instead of just hitting up an advertising agency, actually hit up the people that you want to work for. This information is available online of who works at what agency and what their positions are. Send them a message, send them an email and say, hey, can I buy you a virtual cup of coffee? It'll take $5 or whatever. Because informational interviews are how internships are typically pushed up to the next level. And then once you get an internship, your entire job in that internship is to learn as much as you can and meet and make conversation with as many people as you can. Because it's basically like a test run to see, hey, are you coachable? Can we train you? Do people like working with you? Do you have a good attitude? So just make friends, be friendly, and then always be willing to help and jump on things. And that's going to get you hired super quickly and super reliably too.
Okay, perfect. So I'm making sure to kind of show that initiative and kind of always putting your best foot forward, right? Every day,
yeah,
right?
Definitely.
Not phoning it in. Okay, absolutely. Okay, so we have kind of a wide range of students from kind of the intro ad to some upper creative and media and even campaigns. So if you know that you want to be a creative, when do you know if you want to be a writer versus an art director?
That's a good question. So if you want to be a creative, it depends on essentially what you find yourself losing yourself in. So like everyone gets into a flow state, everyone gets into this area where like you start working on something and you lose 6 hours. If you do something and it kind of feels like you're good at it, but it feels like beating your head against the desk and it's really difficult for you, that probably means that maybe you're the other. Or for me, I think in pictures more. So I'm not really a great writer. I can write and be coherent, but to be super witty and super pointed with what I'm trying to say and super persuasive, that's what a writer does. And so if you're an art director, you lean more towards the visual sides of things and you have a plan for how to execute that. And a writer is the complete opposite in that they know how to say it and sell that.
Perfect. That kind of helps explain that a little bit more. All right, let's see other questions. Sorry, I'm multitasking, not my strength. Would you say that there's a certain level of trial and error in finding your kind of niche in advertising? So whether that is, I know you just kind of touched on that in terms of copywriter versus creative or versus art director. What about in terms of, as you kind of alluded to, your lens and your background in terms of course, you would end up on an Air Force account. Is there some kind of trial and error in that in terms of finding clients that you enjoy and then also agencies?
Absolutely. It's pretty common in this industry to switch agencies and to hop around. That's pretty well accepted and widely known, and that's completely normal. So both in terms of agency culture, the client that you work on, your teammates, all of those things can change. But also there are people, even within my own agency, that started off in creative and started off as a copywriter, switched to an art director, and then now he's a recruiter. So you don't, if you don't like what you do, you're not stuck with it. And even in my account, there's an account leadership person that actually is going back to portfolio school in the spring because he wants to be a creative. So you're not blocked into one thing, and it's completely normal to shop around, essentially. I happen to really like what I do, but a lot of people, if they don't like it, just try something different. And my recommendation would be to try to get on different accounts in the building before you jump agencies. But if that doesn't work, you can always go to a different agency.
So kind of along the same lines, what drew you to GSD&M as kind of your, like kind of what was the drive that made you decide to go there?
Super culture. I knew once I had done the portfolio program that I was going back because I hated my day job, and I hated, if you don't feel excited going to work every day, it's probably an indication of you're not doing the right thing, which I knew I was in the right field. Or you don't like your coworkers or the people you're at. So I was leading more with, I want to find an agency that gives me a good fit for me, my personality, and it happened to be that. And GSD&M has definitely a toned down corporate culture. Like, we don't send emails like, for my last email, to whom it may concern. Like, that's not like the culture of GSD&M, and everyone is just such a nice person, and there's such a family-like camaraderie in every single department on every single account. So that's kind of what settled it for me.
Okay, nice. So I think several students have taken advantage of of the fact that you have your Instagram up there. And so they're kind of asking about kind of like, do you make all of your own graphics and write your own captions? And they say that it was the coolest page they've ever seen.
Well, okay, that's very sweet. Thank you. Yes, I do. So part of the me wanting to create things that connect us more is how I choose to engage with my own social media. I don't post things to be an influencer. I post really vulnerable things because I want you to understand that I am a human being behind this platform that is sharing something with you, and I'm actually creating connection from me to you by you reading it and sharing with me. So that is something that I actually started in quarantine. And so, yes, I make all my own graphics and I write all my own stuff. And it's super weird, and that's okay in advertising.
I feel like advertising does encourage and attract.
Let your freak flag fly.
To represent them, like their true selves, right? Again, exactly everything that you talked about today in terms of providing the different lens that you have. So another question is, so what has been your favorite piece of creative content that you created, or favorite thing that you've worked on?
I think it was, so far, it's the same mission, but I do have a feeling that the upcoming stuff that I'm working on right now is going to be really interesting because the Air Force has an entire branch that basically is just devoted on getting more minorities into pilot roles, and I'm the creative on it, or one of them. So me and my writer partner are in charge of just creating content to inspire today's generation of people of color to just get in the Air Force and get into these leadership positions. So it's a lot of really meaningful content, and it's talking a lot about like, this is a struggle, rise above it, rise above self-doubt. And so yeah, I think my favorite stuff is coming.
Okay, nice. So we'll definitely be on the lookout for that whenever that comes out. Okay, do we have any other questions in the chat that anyone wants to pose? So kind of how do you balance this kind of, so again, as you're trying to promote this inclusivity and this unity aspect, and you kind of talked about the two different messages, right, and how they were interpreted differently, and for both of them, there were positive and negative associated with it. How do you balance kind of the open-minded message with, as you mentioned, that Air Force can't take a stance on different kind of issues. So how do you balance that of ensuring that there is this level of representation, as well as staying true to the brand, but moving the brand forward?
Definitely. So when we're creating all of this content, it can't just be about progressive, like put everyone in here. It also has to have this message that yes, also everyone is a part of this team. So it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from, you are in the Air Force family, and that kind of rounds out that. You know, it's not saying us versus them. It's like us. Everyone belongs here. Yes, you. Yes, you. Yes, you. So it's and it is a balance, because if we, and this is just to say that the amount of revisions that go into a piece of content are in the double digits every single time, and that's completely normal. But if we end up seeing a word here, or if we end up, you know, saying a phrase here, it's reviewed by so many people, and you kind of have to listen to people as they're telling you, hey, this doesn't really feel right. I think this might be misconstrued. So developing a thick skin when you're going through that process will only serve you, because then you start to realize it's not about you. It's about creating a message that works for everybody. So yeah, the balance is constant and it is in flux every single time, but mostly I think you're going to start to see moving forward, especially after this election, you're going to start to see more messages of unity, because we've kind of understood collectively as a nation that we're kind of tired of fighting. And so preaching unity, that's how you do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of other questions are coming in with that. So where do you get your inspirations for your projects? So any kind of, previous people have talked about how they read all these different books or they follow this. So what are some places that you turn to kind of get inspiration?
Yes. Okay. So when you're looking for inspiration, try not to look at other people's finished work. Go outside of your category. I watch a lot of film. I watch a lot of movies. I listen to podcasts. Like anything that is not an ad. Like you can't make good advertising by just studying what advertising has been made, because everything again was created in context. So what could have worked for that context, if you're just trying to say like, oh, that was good, and you reach for it and you just try to copy it, you're not really utilizing all of your own thinking ability and the things that you've seen that are new or completely unrelated and not in your category. Like a lot of there's a book called Design by Nature by Maggie McNabb, and it basically points and shows you that literally everything that we create is has a higher concept and a higher nature reflection through it, and we have unconscious associations with literally everything we do. So that's all to say, I'll drop that link to Craig, and I'll send that out again. But again, just go outside your category, learn the craft, and then stop looking and referencing other people's work all the time. All you're going to do is psych yourself out.
Okay. Because again, like as you alluded to, the revision process could be in the double digits, hopefully never the triple. But so that finished product took a lot of kind of aspects and different twists and turns depending on the needs of the client and kind of the creative agency themselves. Okay, are there any other questions? I think that I went through most of them. So if I did not address your question and you want to type that in the chat real quick, we'll give a little bit more time for that. But one of them is favorite memory so far at GSD&M.
Favorite memory so far at GSD&M. That is a good one. I think my favorite memory, honestly, was when my group creative director, his name is Jeff Mackey, which always look into who you're going to be working for. He was one of the people that I did. He took us to lunch for Christmas, and it kind of, once you see everyone around the table and you kind of start to reflect on who creates all of this work with you throughout the year, you start to understand that like this is your team and this is who you're going to be leaning on in your times of distress or your times of joy. So it's a really, like, I'm really heavily driven by camaraderie. And so that was a really great memory for me. And then also, there was one time in Las Vegas, we had to film some RPA drones, which are huge airplanes, but something that not a lot of people get to do is actually walk on the flight line, which, I mean, like, there are like red paint tapes that if you like step on, there are security forces people that will tackle you and you will get arrested.
Okay.
So like, it's very serious. Like, they don't let people on the flight line, but we were literally on the flight line, maybe 15 feet away from these huge planes taking off at sunrise. And that was just pretty breathtaking. So advertising will take you to some places that you wouldn't expect, and they're just really great to be a part of.
Nice, nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Again, looking. So in terms of your experience at Creative Circus, so you alluded to the fact that you didn't finish up because you went ahead and started at GSD&M. Would you recommend something like that for students to help build their portfolio?
Okay, so my word on portfolio schools, if you can afford it, it will get you there super fast. But you can do it without portfolio school. It might just take you longer. So you're going to have to be a lot more open. You're going to have to seek a lot more feedback, and you do need feedback. So the benefit of portfolio school is that you have people constantly giving you feedback and, like, you know, making you get better, and then it forces you to actually work on your craft in a super quickly amount of time. But not everyone can, like, move across the country and do that. So how you would do that if you don't go to portfolio school is find professional networks like Add to Austin, AAF, NSAC, do those, participate in those, and actually put in a lot of effort into those, because those are going to be your opportunities to create book pieces that are really strong.
Okay. And then I have probably one or two more questions, and then we'll let you enjoy the rest of your day. So do you get a chance to work with PR people very often, kind of as you see the industry kind of blending more into strategic communication? And so it's kind of, as you mentioned, this kind of notion of unity and kind of not the us versus them that like ad and PR used to be as well. Do you work with PR people, and kind of what is their input in your creative process?
So PR people for us are basically amplifiers for the work that we've created. And so PR isn't on every project. The last time that it was on a project, I don't think we did internal PR because we don't have an internal PR firm, but over the summer we did a 1,000,000-piece puzzle, which was really cool. You guys should go check it out. It is the largest online puzzle that has ever been created. It's over like 1.2 million pieces, which is insane, because in order to create that, you had to find an image that stitched together 1,200 gigabyte images to be able to zoom it up, and then also to create that multiplayer thing. So it was just because the Air Force wanted to encourage people to stay indoors during quarantine. And so you could play with your grandma across the world. You could be in the same like puzzle room. So where PR fit into that was we made this super cool thing and we were really excited about it. But what happens is if you create it and no one's giving you attention about it or like shouting to the rooftops about it, how are you going to know? So PR people come into it to kind of seed that message out there, to be like, hey, this is really cool. You should check it out. And so I think it's a really collaborative process because you get to basically be an advocate for good work.
Nice. Thank you. I believe that is the bulk of the questions that we have for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and share so much of your wisdom and insight. And for everyone, the recording will be posted on the Mass Comm Week website, probably tomorrow or the next day.